I see. I love it.
Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Is real journalism a thing of the past in much of the Western world? In the name of security, challenging the official media message of the elites is often met with serious threats and reprisals. Whistleblowers are damned and made to feel severe consequences. What remains is a deafening echo chamber warning all to get in line, or else. To CrossTalk the State of Journalism, I'm joined by David Swanson in Charlottesville. He is an author and radio host who works for rootsaction.org. And in San Francisco, we cross to Robert Rosenthal. He is the executive director of the Center for Investigative Reporting. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. Robert, if I can go to you first in San Francisco, what is the state of investigative journalism in light of all of these affairs with whistleblowers? And I don't have to name names because we all know who they are.
I think actually investigative reporting in the United States is relatively healthy, believe it or not, even with the decline and the destruction, really, of the business model. And what's happened in this country is a lot of independent investigative reporting organizations have started up. The Center for Investigative Reporting is the oldest, actually, and right now the largest. But there's a lot of interest in how do you sustain this kind of information and investigative reporting. The threats from the government, which are real, from the federal government, have put a chill on not only the journalists, but more importantly, the whistleblowers. But at the same time, there are many, many ways to get information and tell the stories that are out there. But it also takes a lot of hard work and skill. Investigative reporting, if it's going to be done really well and have credibility, takes a lot of hard work, knowledge, and access, most importantly, to either documents or sources who can help guide you to the real story.
David, do we have any today, Woodward and Bernstein? Because we know Mr. Snowden approached the Washington Post, but the Washington Post turned him down. So what does that say about the Washington Post, or what does that say about the level of investigative reporting? And I guess I'm focusing on national security here in this case.
Well, it tells you that the Washington Post, like many major media outlets in the United States, is too interested in power, too subservient to statements from the government, too interested in access, and not enough interested in the truth. But the Washington Post has ended up using information that came from documents from Edward Snowden, while at the same time allowing its pundits and op-ed columns and so forth to bash Edward Snowden as a traitor. And so you have major media outlets that, even while benefiting from these whistleblowers, who of course require ever greater courage in the face of the crackdown, bash them in their editorial pages, suggesting where in fact the loyalties of these media outlets actually lie. We of course in the past week have heard about a new media organization being created by a multi-billionaire with journalist Glenn Greenwald and others. What that amounts to remains to be seen, but something is badly needed, I'm afraid.
Robert, what do you think about that? I mean, you mentioned the business model here. I mean, could you be more specific about that? I mean, does it just cost a lot of money? Because I mean, if you can sell a story, it sells itself, okay? It has a ripple effect here. So what do you mean by business model?
Well, I think what I'm saying is I was in the past, I was the editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, which was a great paper, before I became the editor as well. And there were 650 people in the newsroom in 1998, 2000. Now the Inquirer has been sold, I think, 5 or 6 times, and the journalists, there's fewer than a third. And what happened really was that sometimes the most expensive reporters in terms of their salaries and the most skilled, and this happened all over the country, as the newsrooms were downsized and the goal was to cut costs to keep profits high, they were let go. They weren't supported. No newspaper really sustained its revenue and its business based on investigative reporting. It's what the public frequently wanted more than anything else. But at the same time, in journalism, we have an expression, you have to feed the beast, which is even more prevalent today because of the 24-hour news cycle. So if you're really interested in clicks, you're going to do all kinds of things that have more entertainment value than substantial value.
Yeah, I know the problem here.
Reporting
I know the problem. Okay, I mean everybody faces that, including myself. But David, that's where that people have been really let down. David, people have been really let down. I'm thinking of the majors in television and newspapers and whatnot. It said you just go dumb, go yellow, and you'll get exactly what we heard Robert say. You'll get your clicks, but you don't get much good quality public discussion on any particular issue anymore.
Well, that's right. You do get a lot of discussion. It's the good quality that's missing. And it's not always a question of simply not reporting information. Like there was a great study of deaths in the war on Iraq that's appeared in all the blogs and foreign media, but not the U.S. major corporate media this week. It's also often a question of spinning the information in misleading ways and framing the debates in misleading ways. CNN's Faria Zakaria had on 3 billionaires in the past week to discuss the inequality of wealth, where they talk about redistributing wealth as the evil of allowing the people who produce things to keep some of it, and raising the minimum wage instead of restoring part of the value the minimum wage has lost, and job creators, as in robber barons in a previous name for those types of people. And so you have everything framed in a misleading direction, to the point where you have a majority of Americans believing Iraq benefited from the war on Iraq, and a strong plurality believing that Iraqis are grateful for it. And so it's hard to have an informed public or even informed discussions among the pundits when everything is spun in these twisted ways that are almost universally accepted, and the media outlets are aiming for acceptance. And you see this sort of groupthink in the punditry rather than a clash of interests.
Robert, there's quite a few topics.
Let me
go ahead. You want to reply to that? Go, please do.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I think that I don't disagree with that, but I also think that this is something that's happened and existed as long as there's been media, especially in this country. And right now, there's an opportunity, though, with the technology, and I hate the phrase, but I'll use it. There's sort of like what I would call an information elite who understand what's happening and hopefully have the influence. And what we've seen at CIR is that we've had an ability to push information and stories out, not through necessarily big corporate media, though we partner with them, but through social media, through engagement tools that really create an impact and have a result. So I'm not pessimistic. I think it's really, we're in this moment of change. And the other thing I think, and it's sort of dancing around, it's clear, is that certain business models now cater to a specific audience. It's the Fox business model, it's the MSNBC business model. And you could call it disinformation propaganda, but they're spinning information to an audience that wants to hear it. And those are actually small audiences. So, but the mass of people, I still think, are not informed. And that's sort of historical in this country. And it's, I don't think, but it hasn't changed that much, but the technology has created an opportunity to do things in different ways that hopefully reach a bigger audience, not necessarily through, the big mass media. So I think there's opportunities to pursue things and get information out in ways we all have to be really creative about and innovative about.
David, I watch a lot of television. Obviously, it's my job to watch my competitors. And I always see, or more of a trend, propaganda versus propaganda, polemics versus polemics, for polemic's sake. Okay, for entertainment's sake. I call it politainment, because you don't really get to anything, you don't have any kind of meeting of minds or using the same facts. It's the spin versus the spin. And this is very destructive for a democracy and for people trying to understand what's going on.
Absolutely. I think Robert's right that there are encouraging trends, there are potentials, but I think we have a long, long way to go. And when you have an entire debate for weeks covering a shutdown where both sides and both parties have harmoniously agreed not to shut down half the government, the military and the spying and the drug enforcement agency, all of the deadly parts of the government are up and running smoothly, and the whole entire debate is framed around the shutdown of the government, it's very difficult for independent, smaller outlets to insert into that the fact that half the government isn't shut down, the fact that we have shut down feeding the hungry and caring for the sick as inessential, non-essential items while continuing all sorts of supposedly essential, deadly items. It's very hard to talk about that when many of the pundits, and we saw a great study produced within the past couple of weeks about the pundits who were on TV in the lead up to the non-missile strikes into Syria, and how many of them stood to profit from that action, and it wasn't, and the conflicts weren't exposed. Stephen Hadley from Raytheon on as an independent source of information, and you know, and yet the American public said no, despite the corporate media, with the help, in fact, of foreign media and blogs. And it's often amazing to me how far ahead the American public is on many, many issues, and yet how unaware of that. We have majorities imagining we're little fringe minorities on many issues because that's how the media covers things.
You know, Robert, what about that? I mean, because so much of corporate media is owned by corporations, okay? They frame the agenda, exactly what we heard from Charlottesville, from David.
Well, I think, right, and I think what David's point is a good one also, because, you know, if you really look at the corporate media and how they cover certain things, there may be an assumption of what the message is. But the reality today, and I was alluded to earlier, is that people, because of the technology, have access to huge range of information and data. The question is how hard will they work to get it? Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, the build-up to the, you know, what did not happen in Syria is a good example where you could look at sort of the push, but there was clear division in this country, and a lot of people had access to all kinds of information. Some of it very good, some of it very bad, some of it propaganda, but it all filtered into sort of the decision-making process. And again, you know, mass media, you know, think of the 1930s with Father Coughlin in this country and what he represented. And a huge
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to jump in here.
I mean,
we're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the state of journalism. Stay with our team.
I see. I love it.
At one time, I saved money to hire a hitman to shoot me dead from the next building through the open window. I searched through the internet, typing things like, "I'm looking for you, I'm waiting for you."
I wrote, "I'm waiting for you, I'm looking for you." I didn't care at all what this man would be like. Deprived, disabled, ill.
"I'll catch up with you."
No, you won't.
"The battery has run out."
I love everything about him. I've grown to love every hair, every one of his fingertips. Him actually be healthier than other guys who drink beer on a bench.
I've always promised Anna that if she ever realizes it's too much for her and she decides to leave me, I will accept her decision without criticism, because it's her choice.
The Olympic torch is on its epic journey to Sochi. 123 days through 2,900 towns and cities of Russia, relayed by 14,000 people for 65,000 kilometers in a record-setting trip by land, air, sea, and outer space. Olympic torch relay on RT and RT.com. Right from the scene. First-rate news and eye-gripping pictures. On our reporters' Twitter and Instagram. To be in the know, follow us online.
I see. I love it.
Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the state of journalism, whistleblowers, and propaganda versus propaganda. Okay, David in Charlottesville, I'd like to go back to you. Do you like the phrase Obama is having a war against journalism and journalists? Do you think that's a fair characterization?
I never like using war as a metaphor for other things while we continue the barbaric practice of actual war. But I do think that the Obama administration is quite hostile to whistleblowers, to transparency in government, quite the opposite of what candidate Obama campaigned on, and toward independent journalism and freedom of the press, incredibly hostile, to the point where we've begun thinking of whistleblowers as traitors and seeing them prosecuted under the Espionage Act and seeing sources dry up through the intimidation. There is no question. On top of which, you have President Obama presented as the left side of a debate that has two sides and never a third and never goes beyond a certain range, which is incredibly destructive. I mean, during that lead up to the missiles that didn't fly into Syria, I was screened for interviews, and I was told you must take the position. There isn't enough evidence yet to send the missiles, but there might be. And if I objected in the screening process, there never could be anything to justify sending missiles into another country. Well, I wasn't used in that interview.
Okay,
okay,
so David, can I ask you a question? Let me ask you a question, David. Does anybody on the CrossTalk producers ever screen you before you come on the program? Because you've been on before. Have you been screened here? I don't think so.
Well, I'm emailed a topic and a set of questions and says, send me back your brief responses, and I do. I've never been turned down. Maybe I've always given the right responses.
No, because we look for real debate on this program here. That's what we look for, with not agreement or disagreement with me, okay? Because people love to disagree with me. Let's go to San Francisco. Robert, I mean, what accounts for Obama's change from candidate to being president right now? Because, you know, this is the most secret. I don't know, every single president since Richard Nixon, this is the most secretive presidency we've ever had. I mean, how much more secret can it get?
I think that Obama is the most aggressive this administration in terms of whistleblowers and journalists in our history. That's for sure. What did it? I'm not sure, but I think the reality is once you get into power, you have access to all kinds of information that you can't even imagine. And at the same time, I think President Obama seems to have a thin skin. And his administration. And criticism and the adversarial role of the media or the press is historic in this country. And what we're seeing now is the most aggressive, really, strategy or campaign continual against not only the sources but the media in a history of the country. So I think it's potentially quite dangerous. You know, the control of information by the worst governments historically is what they go at. And the first group of people that is really squelched in any kind of totalitarian state are the journalists and the information seekers. So it's something the public needs to be aware of. I think the public is not that aware of it. They don't really understand the difference between mass media, quality journalism, investigative reporting, and it's part of our job to really show what's happening, and the people who support us do understand that, you know, journalism, reporting, investigative reporting is really crucial to protecting the democracy we have. So I think it is a crisis point for a lot of different reasons, not just the financial issues. The Omidyar events of last week or this week we're not sure where that's going, but I think it's good that more people are getting interested in investing in information, and hopefully good information.
You know,
it's available to everyone.
It's very interesting. I agree with that, but I think there's an intuitive understanding with audiences and publics right now, because they don't believe governments. They don't believe this president when it comes to national security. We've already mentioned Syria here. But what the reaction can be is conspiracy theories. People come up, you can't trust them, so this must be happening, which a lot of times is just pure nonsense. But again, it confuses the public sphere. What do you think about that, David?
Well, I think a lot of people distrust the government and distrust the media. And when you hear a New York Times reporter at a panel discussing journalism say, well, you can't call the president a liar, not in the New York Times, most people wonder, well, why in the world not if the president happens to tell a lie? When you have the media endlessly presenting people's viewpoints and two sides to a disagreement without commenting on which side has the facts and where the truth might lie, people lose interest and respect and begin searching for what Robert points out, fortunately, are beginning to develop in significant ways, other sources of information. It is a collaboration between the corporate media and the government that creates a level of incredible distrust, and hopefully responsible, independent, adversarial journalism can restore some trust in the printed word, because we need that. We need to understand what our government is doing and not just dismiss it as unknowable and a wild conspiracy. Of course, many conspiracies are in fact real.
What do you think about that, Robert, in San Francisco? Because, again, I think because of the poor quality of a lot of journalism from the major news outlets, people go elsewhere, and unfortunately, they can trip up and go into a place where it's just counterproductive, and you get the opposite effect here, okay? And there's that filtering. And so I guess it gets down to the real filtering issue here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there again, you get back to what I would call disinformation, and really, I mean, you look at some of the business models. It's about making the other side fail. It's almost dehumanizing them, and there's a hell of a lot of confusion, and people feel like overwhelmed and helpless. And I think they're looking for answers. And you could look at some of the conspiracy theories, and they're quite logical. I don't believe many of them, but people are looking for answers. And again, they have access to information in unprecedented ways. And if you're going to spend time seeking answers for yourself and explanations, they're there. Some are accurate, some are complete BS, some are conspiracies, some are agenda-driven, some are propaganda. And I think it's overwhelming for the consumer. And it takes hard work for somebody to want to be informed. And it's just as dangerous just to go to one source. If you only watch Fox News, your view of the world is really different from somebody who watches MSNBC or CNN or reads the New York Times. I mean, your news sources, if people want to work for it, are sort of limitless right now. How you filter that out and decide what's real or what you want to believe in is really complicated. And I think all these issues we're talking about, to me, are fascinating because we're in this information and technology revolution, which is really unprecedented. You know, you think about the speed of how information moves today, whether it's truth or accurate or not, it distorts everything. And the ability to manipulate and confuse has never been greater on a mass level. So these issues we're talking about are not just frivolous. I think they're really crucial to the functioning, really, of a global intercommunication network and how decisions are made and on a level that can really be abused. And I think one of the things you're talking about, or what we're talking about today, we tend to talk about the wonders of technology and information, but the abusive side of it and where that can go is something that has to be really talked about more.
I agree. David, you know, I guess, I don't know if you're on Facebook. I'm on Facebook because I have to, because I'm in journalism here. And, you know, the stories coming out of Syria and how people want to frame the debate and these horrific pictures. And, you know, because it's my job to look at these things, unfortunately, some of them are just awful to look at. I have no idea if they're true or not. You know what I mean? And this is the confusion that's being created because people are putting these things up on the internet, in Facebook. And I have to be very, you know, I have to decide, you know, do I believe this or not believe this? And I think that's one of the biggest confusions that we have in dealing with media, because if you dismiss the major outlets, which I do, I don't pay attention to them much anymore, and look at very specific people, but I have to know who to trust.
You have to learn who to trust, and we have to develop sources that can be trusted. But I think the problem is that even once we've done that, we don't have the capacity to create stories. We don't have the capacity to create movements. The Occupy movement wouldn't have happened without the corporate media, and when the corporate media went away, it went away. The American public is even more against the CIA arming one side in Syria than it was against sending in the missiles. But because the governments of the world and the corporate media haven't made that a question, people aren't banging down the doors of Congress to say stop arming one side the way they did to say don't send the missiles. And so at some point we're going to have to develop credible, independent sources of information that can create a story. Just as the corporate media creates non-stories, a scandal over the closing of a World War II memorial in Washington, D.C. is a big story, huge, endless coverage. It's a non-story. Yeah. While people are going without food and medicine, and we're continuing to engage in hugely expensive military actions in Afghanistan and elsewhere, The story is all about a World War II memorial. The rest of us, popularly, don't have the ability to do that the way the corporate media still does.
You know, Robert, when I watch CNN, like one of their news rundowns, you know, I'm struck how little news is actually in it. And I look at Fox. I remember the first time I saw Fox, and Fox came into being after I left the United States to live abroad. When I first saw it, I just thought, what is this? This is opinion TV. There are no facts at all. It's just opinion. Personally, I was really shocked. I thought, what has happened to my country? Because there's no news in this news station.
You know, if you click around or you go through all, you know, the major news websites, I agree. I mean, it tends to be the same story, retuned to a certain level or degree, and not much new information. And clearly, you know, Fox's business model, and it's not a secret, is to, you know, carry a conservative or Republican agenda. And their major goal, if you watch their shows, is to really make sure Obama doesn't succeed, or the Democrats. That's a business model. They made a decision, and the people who go there tend to believe that. But I do think this what I call the siloing of information that's developed in this country is dangerous, and at the same time, part of the challenge for organizations like mine is no one has figured out how to sustain it. We have tremendous value to society. We're not partisan. We get results, but are we going to survive in other organizations like ours? Because no one has created, even though its value to society is clear, a business or a value in terms of dollars. So this is the dilemma, you know, sort of.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time. I would have hoped that the truth has some kind of value. Many thanks today to my guests in Charlottesville and in San Francisco. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.
I see.
Scientists.
I love it. He's charming.